Hello guys. In this episode of Learning the TOEFL the Easy Way with Teacher Fish, we will discuss about the independent writing task of the TOEFL. The independent writing task is the second of two writing tasks of the TOEFL. Basically, there are at least 4 types of questions for this task. They are agree or disagree, preference, multiple choice, and imaginary. Here are some examples of how the following questions will be asked. For an agree or disagree question, which is the most common type, it may sound like, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Then followed by a statement that presents an issue. As for preference, which is a common type, the question may sound like, some people say X. Others believe Y. Which opinion do you agree with? Now, a multiple choice question, which is a relatively new type of question in the independent writing task, but is also a commonly asked one. The prompt might sound like, which of the following X is best to Y? Then followed by normally 3 items to choose from. Lastly, for an imaginary question, which is the least common of the 4, the question may sound like, imagine a situation where, then followed by a statement describing a particular situation. What do you think is the best thing to do in this case? However, keep in mind that whatever type of question is asked, it would still require your personal opinion. Also, it would always be best if you'd practice writing essays about varied types of questions, not just the 4 that were mentioned. 'Cause who knows? The TOEFL might present you with a type of question that you haven't prepared for. I mean, I have seen one of my students answer a prompt that asked him to list advantages at the same time disadvantages of a specific thing. So, it would always be safe to practice. As test taker, you will be given 30 minutes to write an essay explaining your opinion about a given question. As for the word limit, there is no maximum word count for this task, but your essay must at least be 300 words long. In order for you to earn a top score, you must be able to clearly write ideas using logical arguments and effective supporting details. Okay. So before we jump to the highlight of our video, let us first talk about how you earn your score for this task. A response is scored from a scale of 0 to 5, with 5 being the highest. However, for us not to spend much time on this part, I will just give you an overview of how a score of 0, 3, or 5 is attained. A response with a score of 0 simply copies the topic, or does not address the topic, or worse, blank. Now you wouldn't let that happen to you, would you? Anyway, an essay with a score of 3 means, the topic was addressed using details that are somewhat unclear and underdeveloped. It may also show unity and coherence but may not include enough transitions between ideas. Lastly, it may include accurate but limited sentence structures and vocabulary. Now, an essay that is capable of earning a score of 5. An essay at this level effectively addresses the topic by utilizing logical organization, appropriate transitions between ideas and paragraphs, developed supporting details for each main point or topic sentence. The essay will also read smoothly and include varied sentence types, suitable vocabulary and expressions. Let us now proceed to our next lesson, which is the writing process. As what I always tell my students, a strong response generally includes an introduction with a clear thesis statement, 2 or 3 body paragraphs with focused topic sentences, and a brief conclusion. And so, the first thing that we will learn is how to write your introduction. A typical introduction is composed of the statement that presents the topic and a thesis statement. However, I like spicing an essay up, so I always teach my students to start their introduction with a hook sentence. A hook sentence, aside from an added flavor to an essay, which may earn a positive impression from the TOEFL raters, also helps increase your word count. By definition, it is a statement that you use to catch the reader's attention. Remember that you are writing at least 300 words long, so it is rather important to immediately engage your reader with your essay. Now, there are many types of hook sentences, but I will just discuss the 3 most effective ones. Effective in a sense that they not only engage your readers, they are also easy to construct, so time-friendly. Let us begin with provocative question hook, or sometimes called an intriguing question hook. This type is very easy to construct. All you have to do is to make the central idea of the question or prompt a part of your question. For example, if the prompt is, "Do you agree or disagree with the following statement?" Students should not be limited to wearing school uniforms when at school. Then your provocative question should include the prompt's idea of wearing school uniforms. Now, when writing your question hook, be sure that the question is not a simple yes or no question. If this happens, then the readers will not be provoked or intrigued by the question, thus not being engaged with the essay. So, when writing your provocative question hook, use question words such as what, why, or how to write a question that would force your readers to think. Here is a sample of an effective provocative question hook. Why is it that most secondary schools in Asia force their students to wear school uniforms, whereas in Western countries like the US, majority of high schools allow their students to wear casual clothing? Also, keep in mind that using a provocative question hook has an advantage and disadvantage. The good thing about it is since it is easy to write, you save time for other parts of the essay. The disadvantage though, since again it is easy to write, everyone must have at least used it in an essay, so it has somewhat become cliched and has lost its impact. But, it does not mean that you cannot use it in your essay, due to the less impact. Well, to a certain degree, it is still effective and that you use it when you feel that it is taking long starting with your essay. The next type of hook is a statement that talks about a personal experience or an anecdote. This, among the three, is the second most effective hook sentence, since it involves a little of the writer's story. Of course, and as we all know, we all have this innate nosiness to try to learn about other people's lives. Anyway, personal experience hook is when you write a statement that is related to the topic and your experience. It can be said as, 70 years ago, when my grandparents used to go to school, their uniforms were only a white shirt and a pair of brown short pants, but now, school uniforms include a polo shirt, an undergarment, a pair of pants, and black leather shoes. A basic rule to remember when writing this type of hook is the use of verb tenses. Be sure that you are not simply switching tenses. You are only permitted to do so when the verbs are accompanied by time markers or time expressions. As in the case of our sample sentence, the verbs used to go and were are in the past tense because of the time marker, 70 years ago. On the other hand, the verb include is in the present tense because of the time expression, now. The downside of this hook type is, if in case you misuse the verb tense, it may pose as a start of a potential basic grammar error deduction. Remember again, the more basic the error is, the higher point or points you lose. So always check your verbs if they agree with your time markers. And so the third basic hook sentence type is called a surprising statement or statistics. This type of hook is the most effective among the three. It is very effective in the sense that it is factual in nature. So in effect, the essay will start to earn a very good reputation from the raters, since the factual statement makes it more credible. However, you have to remember that the statement you share should be from a legitimate source, like a research conducted by a known institution, a news report from a dependable source like CNN or BBC, an article from a textbook, or a journal entry that was written by a famous writer. For example, according to the Philippine Information Agency, the Department of Education has announced that public school students will not be mandated to wear school uniforms beginning school year 2022 to 2023. When writing a surprising statement hook, do not forget to include the source of information in order to make it easier for the readers to fact check if they'd wish to do so. Also, including the source makes the statement more credible. Another thing to note is, never attempt to make up facts, because as said earlier, should the reader decide to do his or her fact checking, and that the statement you wrote was found to be false, instead of earning a good reputation, might turn to disinterest. So if you are a person who is up to date with current events, then hook sentence number 3 is your best bet. Alright, moving on to the next part of the introduction, background information. In writing, this is the part where you provide a hint to your readers about the topic that you are going to discuss in the essay. Background information is also the sentence that may define the issue. In other words, it is an additional piece of information that enables the readers to know what you intend to write. Before I give you a sample, let us first learn about two basic rules in writing a background information. First is, do not write a sentence that is too general, because having little information might confuse the reader or leave him clueless. The next is not too specific, the readers might get overwhelmed or the essay might go off topic. So here is the sample of a background information sentence. The issue of wearing school uniforms, especially in public schools, has resurfaced after the Department of Education Secretary's announcement of making it optional. While it is always best to follow your hook sentence with background information, sometimes you might find it difficult to write a background information, and that it might be a cause of too much consumption of your working time. There are several factors that may bring this issue up. It may be due to not having enough knowledge of the topic, for example. Anyway, should you have any trouble writing one, do not fret since you still have an optional statement. In class, we call it a bridge sentence or a statement that presents the two sides of the prompt. Now, the optional statement may not be as effective as background information, but is very useful in situations like lack of knowledge of the topic or when a lot of time has been spent just thinking of what background information to write. The sentence may be written as, some proponents believe that the pronouncement of the DepEd Secretary regarding the optional use of school uniforms eases the financial burden of parents. Others worry that if wearing school uniforms becomes optional, many schools might slowly lose their identities. Keep in mind that when writing this type of sentence, be sure that both sides of the prompt are mentioned and that each side would at least have an advantage or benefit. And so, we have come to the most important sentence in your essay, the thesis statement. By definition, the thesis statement is the statement that informs the readers what to expect from your essay. Think of it as a blueprint. Isn't it the purpose of a blueprint is to guide the workers how a structure or building should be made? Anyway, the same with the thesis statement, it should give your readers a vivid idea of your opinion. Just a little reminder again, when choosing which side of the prompt you will discuss in your essay, never think of choosing the right side of the argument. There is no such thing as wrong choice in an opinion essay as long as you are able to fully discuss the side you picked. Now, there are two types of thesis statements. First is what we call direct thesis statement. The next is indirect thesis statement. Keep in mind that whichever type you use in the introduction will greatly affect how you'd write your concluding paragraph. We will discuss about it a little later. So, when writing a direct thesis statement, two things must be part of the statement: the writer's opinion and the clearly stated reasons for holding such opinion. For example, you may say, in the same manner, I think it would be best for schools to make wearing school uniforms a strict policy, since it has been practiced in the country for so long and for safety. Notice that the sample sentence has two parts: the writer's thought or opinion, which is, I think it would be best for schools to make wearing school uniforms a strict policy. Then the second part, which contains the reasons of the writer, the practice of wearing uniforms for a long time and safety concerns. Also notice that the thesis started with a transitional expression, in the same manner. Isn't it that transition is a part of your score in independent task? This is the start of you using your expressions. Now, when using a transition, always be sure that it matches the idea of the previous sentence. So if the background information has the same opinion as you, then use transitions that show support like, in the same manner, similarly, or other similar expressions. In contrast, if the previous sentence is not the same in opinion as yours, then make use of a transition of contrast like, however, on the other hand, or other similar expressions. Let's again have our previous example. Others worry that if wearing school uniforms becomes optional, many schools might slowly lose their identities. The previous statement obviously is not in favor of making school uniforms optional, so if I were holding the same opinion, then my thesis statement will start with a transition of support, like in the same manner. On the other hand, if my opinion is to make wearing school uniforms optional, then my thesis statement would start with a transition of contrast like, however. Moving on, the next type of thesis statement is the indirect thesis. This type still contains the writer's thought or opinion, but does not specify the reasons, instead just hinted at. For example, an indirect thesis statement may be written as, in the same manner, I think it would be best for schools to make wearing school uniforms a strict policy, due to 2 reasons. Notice again that it still has the writer's opinion, but the reasons are just hinted. By the way, aside from, due to 2 reasons, you may use other phrases that would provide the readers a clue of how many points you are going to write about to back up your chosen side of the prompt. You may use, because of several factors, for a number of reasons, or similar phrases you know. Needless to say, the transitional expression that you will use at the start of your thesis should still agree with the previous statement. Before we move to the next part of an essay, let us first have a recap of the introduction. Starting with the hook sentence that catches the attention of the readers. The 3 types of hook sentences again are provocative question, personal experience or anecdote, and surprising statement or statistics. Then we have background information or an optional statement. Finally, the thesis statement, and it again has 2 types, direct and indirect. Okay, moving on to the body paragraphs. A TOEFL essay can be written with 2 or 3 body paragraphs. Remember, your target is to reach at least 300 words. So, a 2-body paragraph or a 3-body paragraph essay would both work as long as it reaches the minimum word count, and that you finish writing it in 30 minutes. Now, you may use any type of body paragraph, for as long as it suits the type of essay you are writing. For an opinion essay, which is the most common type of TOEFL essay, I suggest using either a reason and example paragraph or a comparison and contrast paragraph. However, we will pay attention to reason and example, since it is the type that is more useful in almost all prompts. Now, the first sentence of the body paragraph is the topic sentence. It acts as the main idea sentence of the paragraph. When writing a topic sentence, be sure that 2 things are included, the topic and the controlling idea. Remember this, it is the controlling idea that you develop in the paragraph and not the topic, because all the body paragraphs will have the same topic, but different reasons or controlling ideas. Let us have this example. 1 reason schools have to make wearing school uniforms mandatory is because it has been a part of the country's tradition. As you can see, the topic is the mandatory wearing of school uniforms, then followed by the reason, it has been part of the country's tradition. After writing your topic sentence, you must then support it. Supporting details are statements that help clarify the idea presented in the topic sentence. Specifically, supporting detail 1 directly supports the topic sentence. There are many types of supporting details, but the best to use is your first supporting detail as an evidence. It is a type of supporting statement that is again factual in nature and accompanied by the source of information. So since it is factual in nature, be careful not to write a sentence that we call false fact. Doing so will again harm the credibility of your essay. So let us have this sample statement. As soon as the pronouncement was made by the Secretary of the Department of Education regarding the optional use of school uniforms, a number of school officials, both from public and private institutions, and even historians, expressed their grievances, as reported by 2 news channels. But what if I am not aware of any evidence or factual statement? In this case, you still have an option B, which is to simply use an explanation. To even make the process easier, when writing an explanation, ask yourself the question, how, why, or for what. For example, the practice of wearing it has been passed on to many generations, even dating back to the 1950s, so it has become a common scene to see students walking on the streets in their school uniforms. Remember again that, while an explanation may be deemed as inferior compared to an evidence-based supporting detail, it does not mean that it is not effective. The good thing about using it is faster to write, and maintains the originality of the writer's essay, since it is not something you derive from a source. And so, the next type of supporting detail is an example. Now, if you used an evidence as your first supporting detail, it would be wise to be consistent. I mean, the example may come from a source that is legitimate. For instance, it may again come from a report from a credible newsroom, an article posted in a newspaper or a magazine, or from other similar types. So here is a sample, posted on its official website. One of the oldest primary and secondary all-boys schools in the country aired its dismay about the proposed law. On the other hand, when giving an example for an explanation, make it personal. It may be something that you or someone that you know have experienced. So the sentence may go like this. For example, all the boys in my family, rooting from my grandfather, attended the same school and wore the same type of school uniform. The next type of supporting detail is called an illustration. It is a statement that further explains or expounds the example statement. Simply put, it is an additional detail that makes the example clearer. Let us have our example statement again. The uniforms we wore when we used to go to the same school has become a staple topic in family gatherings, and a part of our family's tradition for many generations. The last sentence in a body paragraph is called a closing statement. A closing statement, as the name suggests, signals your readers that you are about to end your paragraph. When writing one, start the sentence with a transition like, therefore, so, or consequently. Then it will be followed by a restatement of the topic sentence and a summary of the points discussed in the paragraph. It may be written as, therefore, due to its traditional value, like that of my family's, wearing school uniforms should be made compulsory. Again, let us have a recap of the parts of a body paragraph. We have the topic sentence which acts as the main sentence of the paragraph, followed by a supporting detail 1, either an explanation or an evidence. Next is supporting detail 2, an example. Then supporting detail 3, which is an illustration or further explanation of the example. Lastly, the closing statement, a restatement of the topic sentence and a summary of points discussed in the paragraph. And so, we move now to the last part of an essay, the concluding paragraph. Remember earlier, I mentioned that the type of thesis statement you chose to write would affect the way you write the conclusion. Let us first list down the parts of a conclusion, starting with the restatement of the thesis statement, followed by the summary of key points. Last is your call to action. Start your conclusion again with a transitional expression like, in conclusion, in sum, or other similar expressions. Then followed by the restatement of the thesis statement. Let us try to restate our direct thesis statement. It may be written as, in conclusion, I believe that schools should have stern policies about wearing the prescribed clothing at school, due to its long history and security concerns. While our indirect thesis statement may be written as, in sum, I think it would be better for schools to have firm policies about wearing the prescribed clothing, whenever inside the premises of the school. And so, here is how the thesis in the introduction affect your conclusion. If in the introduction, you wrote a direct thesis statement, then the conclusion will only be comprised of the restatement of the thesis statement and a call to action. However, if in the introduction, you wrote an indirect thesis statement, then you have to have all three components in your conclusion. Here is why. The summary of key points are basically your reasons too. So it is only needed when you used an indirect thesis in the introduction. To summarize your key points, you simply include all your topic sentences or reasons for that matter in a single sentence. So if you used a direct thesis, which already includes the reasons for holding an opinion, then needless for you to do the second part of the conclusion. If you do so, it will just be a repeat of what you already did when you restated your direct thesis. Consequences may be, the raters will give the essay a weak impression, you might just spend time on a useless sentence in the essay, and worse is you might run out of word substitutes. Anyway, here is a sample of a summary of key points. Being a part of a country's practice and the safety it provides to the members of a school are just two of the benefits of making it mandatory. Finally, we have call to action. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, call to action is the final words of the writer. And there are 4 basic types of call to action. Personal insight is the first. This is a type of call to action that is very useful in a narrative type or personal experience essay. Usually, it is a statement containing an unforgettable event in the story the writer shares or a lesson that he learned. For example, I used to think that wearing school uniforms is so outdated, but I learned that it is also a way to prevent juveniles from committing crimes, since potential offenders are aware that they will be sanctioned by their schools. The next type is suggestion or recommendation. This is when the writer suggests or recommends a better course of action. In an opinion essay, this type is the most common, yet the most effective. Come to think of it, you are consistently trying to convince your readers to believe what you said until the end of your essay. So here is an example. Because of the mentioned benefits of wearing school uniforms, it would be best for the Department of Education to revisit its proposed law before making it official. The third type of call to action is usually avoided by most writers, because they say it has a negative indication, is called a warning. It is when the writer cautions the readers. Although it might sound negative and of course you would want to end your essay on the positive side, remember that there are still prompts that might ask for it. I mean, what if the prompt is about building a new establishment in a residential area, or a prompt that might compromise the well-being of students or even the environment? And so, personally, I do not limit my students from using a warning. Here is an example. Should some schools allow their students to wear casual clothing, they have to also be ready for consequences, like the school's name being dragged, should a student commit a misdemeanor or felony, even if it happens outside of campus. The last type of call to action is called a prediction. I bet all of you know what a prediction is. Now, in an essay, it is when the writer foresees what effect something might have. For example, if schools become lenient with the policy of school uniforms, 20 years or even less from now, no school in the country will have its own identity. Before we end the video, here is an outline of a TOEFL essay. You may copy it, or take a screenshot of it, so that you would be guided on how to better organize your essay. We have again reached the end of our lesson about the independent writing task of the TOEFL. I hope that after watching the video, you now have an idea how to write your TOEFL independent essay. Stay tuned because the next lesson video that I will upload is about how you improve your score in the independent writing task. I also have other TOEFL lesson videos on my channel, so please do check them out. For comments, questions, and feedback, please leave them on the comment section and I will do my best to answer them as soon as I can. Finally, please do not forget to press like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so that you'd stay informed whenever I upload a new lesson video or practice exercises. And always remember, the TOEFL is not difficult, if you know what to do. With that, see you again on the next episode of Learn the TOEFL the Easy Way with Teacher Fish.